Okay, what the fuck is shadow work? Someone sent me a profile of a coach on Instagram and their bio reads this: I help women create unshakable confidence through shadow work, subconscious reprogramming, and energetics. And then their headline reads, Mindset and Life Transformation Coach. And if you've been here for any amount of time, I'm sure you can guess how I feel about that. Anyways, after looking through this person's profile, I messaged the individual that sent it to me. And I asked if they knew this person personally because I had a few mutual connections and I was just curious if they had like any more insight into who this person was. And so their response to me was, I don't, but lots of mutuals, LOL. Want to know what shadow work is? Sounds spooky. Now, as someone who has been engulfed in the coaching industry for many years, I am familiar with this online narrative of subconscious reprogramming and doing shadow work. And as a quick summary to spoil everything I'm going to talk about in this video, if you are someone who feels like you need to do shadow work, you should probably just go to therapy. Anyways, I thought I would take this time to enlighten those of you who don't know what this is with a little bit more information. So what's up, friends? Welcome back to my channel. Hi if you're new here, hi if you're not. My name's Danielle and I make commentary content here on YouTube. Some days I'm teaching you how to start and build a business, and other days I'm teaching you about online coaching scams that you can hopefully avoid in the process of starting your business or living your own life. I want to start this video by giving a shout out to my VIP channel members, Lisa Loading and Pablo Eater. If you're interested in learning more about my channel membership, you can click the join button down below. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you haven't already. Subscribe to my channel. Today, we are going to be talking about shadow work. What is it? Why do I think it's inappropriate for coaches to be talking about? What does it look like in practice? And of course, I will share a few real life examples. If you watched any of my other deep dive videos, you know the drill. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So what is shadow work? When we hear the term shadow work, maybe we think ghosts, maybe we think spooky, maybe we think dark and mysterious, and so on and so on and so on. For the record, it is none of those things. In fact, shadow work is a term that is legitimately used in the practice of psychology. And the term the shadow was actually brought to the Western world by psychologist Carl Jung. Carl Jung? Someone correct me in the comments. I will link his biography down in the description of this video if you're not familiar with who he is. Essentially what he did was he described the shadow as the unconscious and disowned parts of our personality that the ego fails to see, acknowledge, and accept. So essentially, it's considered any aspect of our being that is not brought forth to our consciousness. So if we think about the idea of being a child or being a kid where we're kind of like a whole, we're not really aware of what's going on around us. As we start to get older, we are told by, society, the people in our lives, etc., about the good parts of us and the bad parts of us. And so then what happens is the parts that we see as bad are then rejected, and consequently they form this like hypothetical shadow. And so the idea here is that this shadow can show up in our actions, in our life experiences, in the way that we show up in the world. And it can really heavily impact us if we aren't aware that it's going on. And so shadow work tends to refer to developing the sense of awareness of what those pieces are and then working to heal those parts of us so that we can kind of like become whole again. So in my research for this video, I actually found that in clinical sort of psychotherapy and psychology, shadow work isn't something that is super common. In fact, there are few people who are actually properly trained in this form of psychotherapy. Let me repeat that again. Few people are trained in delivering this type of psychotherapy. Psychotherapy being an actual practice with a trained professional, like a social worker, a registered psychologist, or a registered or licensed therapist. Not a coach who did a certificate in an online course. Anyways, in a traditional practice with a licensed professional, again, a psychologist, a psychotherapist, a social worker, etc., that professional will typically walk clients through a variety of different therapeutic practices. This can include journaling, dream analysis, mindfulness work, psychoanalysis, a multitude of different exercises to help explore these subconscious patterns or behaviors. Again, it's important to note here that this is a very specialized form of therapy. And I think that it's imperative to understand that people who choose to pursue shadow work in order to overcome different past traumas or serious mental health concerns need to be doing so with a licensed professional. Why? Because those people are actually properly trained in how to deal with trauma and mental health. And so here's where I take issue. Much like I've talked about in many other videos and live streams that I've done here on this channel, trauma is not something that we mess around with. And I have a huge problem with these people who call themselves life coaches, spiritual guides, whatever, taking these week-long, month-long, 2-day weekend courses in trauma sensitivity, then going out into the world calling themselves a trauma coach. There is a massive difference between being trauma informed and understanding, how to work around trauma sensitivities versus actually advertising yourself as a practitioner who helps people work through their trauma. So for some context, I used to own a private yoga studio. I did a few different trauma informed yoga trainings. But that does not mean that as a yoga teacher, I could show up and start diagnosing and treating people's trauma. All it meant was that when I was delivering my yoga class, I could do so in a way that would hopefully not trigger people who were suffering from PTSD. Therapists in Canada specifically that are trained in trauma, and I fact-checked this with a friend of mine who is in school to become a therapist right now, actually have to do additional work and study to specialize in trauma specifically. And it is incredibly dangerous to do trauma work with clients who are suffering from the experience of trauma without having the proper education and understanding on how to deal with the outcome of that trauma. You see, trauma is incredibly complex. It impacts our brain, it impacts our nervous system, it impacts the body's ability to regulate stress and respond to everyday scenarios, and it can have lasting impacts on someone's life. And so I just think the audacity someone would have to think that just because they took someone's course about how to coach people on their trauma, that they now have the skills and ability to help people work through these challenges. It's actually so astounding to me. That being said, I wanted to show you what some of this actually looks like in the online space. And I want to demonstrate just how good these people are at making them sound like they have the solution to fix all of your problems. Again, it's so dangerous. I don't think I can say that enough. And that's why I really want to talk about it. Now, I will note before we get into the first video that I had a hard time finding videos because what a lot of these people like to do is play trending sounds in the backgrounds of their videos, which means I can't use them in mine. So I did my best to find, I think, 4 different videos that we're going to look at, and we'll just kind of continue the conversation from there. Okay, so the first video here is actually the same person. She has a part 1 and a part 2. So we're going to watch both videos back to back, and then I will add my thoughts.
What is shadow work? I get this question all the time. Shadow work is very important when it comes to integrating yourself as a person, manifesting, all that good stuff. Shadow work would be defined as looking at the parts of yourself, mind, your behavior, your emotions that you avoid the most, and giving them space to speak. Here's what that looks like.
Okay, I cut out a section of this video because she's just promoting herself and her products.
But this is how I explain shadow work. Another thing, if the word shadow is not aligning with you, try replacing it with the word shame. The first part of shadow work that you can focus on is behavioral. This looks like the behavior that you exhibit in your life that you are very ashamed of. This could look like stealing money, cheating, whatever. Whatever behavioral patterns that you have that you're super ashamed of, that's where you focus on the behavioral section in shadow work.
You are going to help someone overcome compulsive cheating, stealing, lying, etc. Pardon me.
Second section is mental. So this could look like having intrusive thoughts that you repress, that you're super ashamed of. I have OCD, so I tend to have intrusive thoughts. I'm literally don't think that. And that is essentially a part of my shadow that I need to integrate. That's essentially what exposure therapy is. It's working with the things that you want to avoid.
But exposure therapy is done by a licensed and trained professional, so just my 2 cents.
The second mental process could be a limiting narrative. That would look like you make one little mistake and you're I'm such a stupid fucking idiot. Those are the mental processes. And the emotional aspect of shadow work could look like emotions that you repress. If you are very uncomfortable with experiencing anger, and so every time you experience anger, it comes out as passive aggression, it's a good indicator that you need to essentially give that anger a voice because you're ashamed of it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's a quote by some philosopher that I should know for credibility. Nothing that is human is alien to me. It's essentially realizing that you can waste your life being ashamed over a whole plethora of things. Really, even the darkest parts of the human psyche deserve a voice because the more they are repressed, the more they come out in passive aggressive action. Like, think about how sexuality is repressed in the Christian church and how that plays out. That's a call for shadow work.
Okay, that took a weird turn there at the end. Let's watch part 2.
If you are struggling with shadow work, if you're curious about shadow work, please, baby, don't scroll. In my last video, which I'll link in the playlist, I talked about what shadow work is. Here's how to do it, or at least how I do it.
Again, I just cropped out the part where she's promoting her own stuff.
Okay, so there's you as you are right now. There's your highest self, which we love to focus on because it feels really good and affirming or whatever. And then there is your shadow self, who we don't like to focus on as much because it feels shameful or scary. There are other parts of yourself, like your inner child, but we'll talk about that later. So how to do shadow work, how to connect with that shadow self. The first step, you're going to get in touch with your shadow self through journaling and meditation. When you are journaling, I want you to set a timer for 10 minutes and literally do not stop writing. Don't let the pen stop writing. You answer the question, what am I most avoiding? While you are meditating, I want you to visualize your shadow self, exactly what they look like. If you need a prompt for this, ask, what am I most ashamed of? Literally visualize your shame or negative self-talk, like whatever you're like, just anything that you hate about yourself. Visualize it as if it were its own person. Mine usually looks like this hyper anxious, like fucking like trembling from head to toe bitch who's drinking like a ton of booze. Once you're sure that you're in touch with your shadow, usually you'll know, ironically, you might go into it thinking that you'll feel really scared to meet this person, but you'll often know that you're in touch with your shadow when you feel pity. You're like, oh dude, you can't live like this.
Some people literally don't have the capacity to do that. This just seems really dangerous, like you're opening a can of worms that this person as a practitioner would not have the tools and skills to be able to help you work through. I don't know if anyone else is getting those vibes, but this just seems like
Anyway, so you ask your shadow what it needs. Usually, you'll say things like, tell me I'm secure, but 9 times out of 10, literally all it's asking is for you to accept it. Think of your shadow self as like a kid on a playground and all of these other kids are excluding it. All of these other kids are you, by the way, so you need to get them in check so that they incorporate this little guy. Doesn't want revenge, doesn't want anything, only just wants to be accepted and included. Acceptance, literally just accept it.
But again, some people don't have the cognitive ability to be able to accept themselves for all of the things that they've had to deal with or have gone through in their lifetime. Like me just deciding one day that I'm going to accept all of these horribly traumatic things that happened to me isn't how it works.
And for the last step, literally just integrate whatever it needs and check in. If it needs to be told that you are secure, if it needs to go out and have a wild night at the club within reason, if it needs to be accepted, do that and then check in with it periodically, see what it's saying. Hope that helps.
So I think the piece that's really missing here, or the lack of understanding that this person has, is that when you are someone, especially I'm thinking in the context of like someone who struggles with PTSD, particularly from like SA or some sort of physical form of violence, you don't have the physical ability to feel safe in your body. And so for you to unearth all of these things by asking yourself these questions and then just say, you just have to accept it and tell yourself that you're safe. Like, I don't feel safe in my body, so telling myself that I feel safe isn't going to magically make it happen. And that's the piece that's really missing here. I'm generalizing a little bit here, but from these people that want to like offer this kind of help, they don't have the tools and skills to properly execute. Okay, let's go into the next video.
Shadow work is when we intentionally uncover and reclaim suppressed parts of ourselves that we have suppressed as a result of either trauma and or because we were taught that these parts were undesirable and we would not be able to receive love, connection, safety, and security if we were to actually show these parts of ourselves. Let's look at a really clear example of this from my own childhood. So I was somebody who was obsessed with reading. I loved the Harry Potter books, and I would get really stressed out at having to play group sports with other kids when I was a lot younger. And there's this one day I went to the beach with my family, my parents, and some other family friends and their kids that were around the same age as us. I brought my Harry Potter book thinking, yes, like beach time, I'm gonna get to read. So we get to the beach, we're all sitting around, I plop down next to all the other parents that, are like sitting in their chairs. All the other kids go and start playing beach volleyball. So I crack open my book and all of a sudden, all of the other parents, including my parents, are sitting there going, Dana, go play with the other kids. You're at the beach. This is not the place for reading. You should go and play. Kids play when they go to the beach. And I remember my face getting really hot and feeling really embarrassed because I was like, oh, like, am I weird? Is this weird? But I don't want to do that. That doesn't feel good to me. I don't desire to do that. What I actually desire to do is to read. And I remember all of the parents over and over again saying, go play, go play, go play. You can imagine the scenario when you just see a kid that desperately does not want to do that, but all of these adults around this child is saying, go and do that because what you're doing right now is weird. So in that moment, what my nervous system learned was that I should feel shameful, embarrassed, and weird about the fact that going to the beach, I wanted to read my book and not do the same things as the other kids. This was something undesirable and weird about me. And all these people were speaking out to tell me that I did not fit in and I was not receiving their approval. And so then what happens is I start to suppress that part of myself. When I would go out in social situations where previously maybe I'd brought my book, I would force myself to either not bring my book or read for way less time and try and force myself to participate in things that I didn't want to do, therefore suppressing and shaming that part of me that was my real self. And you can imagine that when we're talking about deeply traumatic experiences or chronic exposure to people shaming you, this shadow self, this suppressed part of you gets bigger and gets embedded deeper and deeper into your nervous system and your psyche. And often when we express anger, rage, grief, or sadness about these parts being suppressed, we are told that those emotions are not positive and we should not feel them, and that being angry is a sign of emotional immaturity or an undisciplined mind, which is all complete bullshit. So shadow work allows us to reclaim these parts of ourselves and to actually experience safety while having emotions like anger, grief, and rage, which are really, really important for healing. I have a full lesson breaking this down inside my Soma Love membership, and the lesson is already available.
Okay, so I don't think that anything she said was particularly incorrect. In fact, she kind of reiterated what I was talking about at the beginning of this video, which is this idea that as children, we are told and have had things said to us that then lead us to believe that like certain parts of us are good or bad. And I think the reason why this video in particularly really irks me so much is because she's like so close to being on the cusp of understanding that there are like deep-seated issues that need to be worked through here, but then identifies herself as a nervous system coach and is not actually a licensed professional. And so I've mentioned this in live stream videos and other videos that I've done, but I think that there seems to be this common trend that when individuals are able to recognize certain things about themselves or accomplish certain things within their lives, it suddenly compels them and allows them to have this feeling wherein they think they are now qualified to speak upon this topic and teach it to other people. And again, I've said this 100 times in this video already, but I think that that's really where the danger for me, or from my perspective, comes. Because sure, I'm absolutely not discrediting her experience. That sounds really awful to be a child and to be treated that way and to be made to feel like the things that you enjoy and the things that you find pleasure in are not okay and not normal. But again, if you're carrying that with you into adulthood and maybe she's done the work and she's overcome it, that doesn't now make her qualified to help other people overcome their experiences, because she said it herself. If it's deeply seated traumatic experiences, you really need to do the work to address those. And someone who is an online life coach isn't the type of person that should be helping you work through that significantly deep trauma. And so I wanted to bring attention the vulnerabilities that this kind of video brings to light, because this was in her comment section. Someone commented, "What about if you had a traumatic childhood and don't remember much from it? How can I work on myself if I don't remember anything?" And to me, this alone is a huge red flag, that if you're attracting these people who legitimately have had traumatic experiences and are just looking for help to process what they have gone through, coming across a video like this and being like, oh my God, this person can help me, when they're not properly trained to help you, is where this danger truly lies. So then other people in the comments started responding by noticing what you consider unacceptable in others, what behavior you hate in others, you probably reject in yourself. And then somebody else asked, this is what I came to ask. So there's so many people that need help working through their traumatic issues and experiences, and they're finding help from random strangers on the internet who, quite frankly, just aren't properly trained to be dealing with this, and it breaks my heart. And I think it really just speaks to like the inaccessibility of therapy in general. I know in America it's pretty much the same as Canada. It's super expensive and hard to access for a lot of people. I get that. And so sometimes people are just looking for like any kind of outlet that can help. I just think that there's like a very slippery slope when people are knowingly going around advocating as like therapy coaches or trauma coaches, when they're not actually trained in trauma. It just, it makes me really upset.
I know I need to do shadow work,
But how?
Hey boo, I got you. So first things first, when you want to do shadow work, you want to make sure that you are in a safe space. And make sure you don't do this when you're having a bad day.
Or like, don't do it at all unless you're in a office with a licensed professional or under the guidance of someone who actually knows what they're talking about.
You'll know when the time is right. After you woo-side out, cleanse your space, center yourself, then what you want to do is write a list of all of your triggers. And as you write down those triggers, you're going to be flooded with emotion. Then take a step back, process those emotions, and then write down how you feel.
But how do I process those emotions? What are the tools and techniques that I need in order to be able to process those emotions? Again, if I don't feel safe in my body, how am I going to know how to process those emotions when I don't have the ability to?
And I promise you, while you do this, memories that have been stuck in the back of your head will be pushed forward.
Which is incredibly dangerous. Hello, are you listening?
And a lot of those things will come to light. And that unawareness is our shadow, and we're bringing it towards the light.
Which is an incredibly dangerous practice if we aren't working with someone who can properly help us deal with those things.
And rather than being afraid and judging our shadow, we want to provide our shadow with compassion. Because all the shadow is your younger self. It's the part of you that didn't get that care that it needed. Then write down those things that you want in life. Becoming aware of your shadow, bring forth positive change.
Good. Okay, I will agree. You know, if we can be aware of the things in our lives that are holding us back, that can help to propel us forward. However, again, coming back to what I've said a million times by now, if it is something that is deeply rooted in past traumatic experiences, we should not be doing that on our own. Okay, we have one more video to get through.
Here's a shadow work technique that completely changed my life. It's literally like a month of therapy with one exercise.
I don't know about that. That's a pretty bold claim to be making, sir.
Step number 1, identify it. You're going to think of something that's holding you back. These could be about an ex, these could be about your childhood, these could be about getting fired from a job. Step number 2, invite it. Picture that old version of you struggling with that and invite it in to have a conversation. Step number 3, talk to it. You're going to engage in a dialogue with that old past version of you struggling with that thing. You might ask some questions. Why are you doing this? Why do you believe this? Step number 4 is to acknowledge it. You're literally just listening empathetically to that part of you vent. Step number 5, this is the most important part, is you're going to integrate it. Give that past self everything it didn't get but needed in that moment. Support, encouragement, positive reframe, different way of looking at it. Try that exercise and give the old version of yourself all the resources that you have in this current version.
Again, not inherently wrong, could be helpful for some people, but very dangerous for those people who are not in a position to be able to process these feelings on their own. However, because this is on like a public platform, they may be led to believe that they can deal it with themselves. They're going to open up Pandora's box and not know how to put it all back together. Honestly, people, I can feel my blood pressure rising. Please just go to therapy. And I know I've said already, therapy isn't accessible for everyone, but if you're going to be willing to put out hundreds or thousands of dollars to one of these life coach grifters that's going to help you do your shadow work, you would be much better off to take that money and go and pay a licensed trained professional. I would love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and I will see you in my next video. Let's go ahead and leave you with this video right here next. Bye!